Before we jump into the chaos, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss the next adventure. Every medical professional on the station mobilized when scanners showed Adriel consuming lethal poison dosages, which made it awkward when Adriel walked into the medbay asking why everyone kept calling him. Adriel stood in the recreational commons heating up leftover chili in the public food warmer, the kind of leftover that had been sitting in cold storage since yesterday, waiting for its moment to shine. Atmospheric sensors positioned throughout the commons suddenly detected airborne capsaicin concentrations, rising to levels typically associated with planetary riot suppression. The numbers climbing on the monitoring screens looked less like food preparation and more like someone had weaponized lunch. Kinthralsex walked past the commons entrance, took 3 normal steps, stopped mid-stride like he'd hit an invisible wall, and collapsed onto the deck plating. Every sensory organ the alien possessed decided simultaneously that staying conscious near whatever chemical weapon had just been deployed was a terrible survival strategy. Burning sensations overwhelmed systems designed to detect danger from half a sector away. Station automated systems, which had been peacefully monitoring air quality and minding their own business, suddenly classified the entire commons area as contaminated with nerve agents. Within 90 seconds, hazmat teams mobilized from 3 different departments. Alarms that rarely saw use outside drills started making noise. Personnel evacuation recommendations scrolled across every display panel. Adriel, completely oblivious to the chaos materializing around him, stirred his chili with a plastic utensil and frowned at the uneven heating patterns. Some parts were bubbling while others remained stubbornly cold. The food warmer had been acting up for days and maintenance kept saying they'd get to it eventually. Solarigen arrived in full protective gear that made her look like she was preparing to handle unstable reactor cores rather than investigate a long goat dining area. The helmet's heads-up display showed contamination readings that shouldn't exist outside military testing facilities. She spotted Adriel standing calmly at the warmer, and her translator made a confused chirping sound. "Where is the chemical leak originating?" Silara Gen's voice came through the suit speakers with slight distortion. Adriel pointed at the food warmer with his spoon. "Could someone check this? My chili isn't heating evenly." Velvron Jax arrived next, carrying a medical scanner that immediately started screaming results nobody wanted to hear. The medical officer took one look at the readouts, looked at the container in Adriel's hands, and immediately tried to knock it away from the human. Reflexes born from cycles of emergency response training kicked in. Adriel pulled the bowl away protectively, holding it against his chest like someone was trying to steal his lunch. "Hey, this is mine. I've been looking forward to this all morning." That substance registers toxin levels sufficient to terminate biological function in 8 quintral secs simultaneously. Velvron Jax's scanner kept beeping warnings. Immediate disposal required. Medical readouts projected into the air between them showed compounds that belonged in hazardous material storage, not recreational dining areas. Silaragen authorized forced medical intervention because watching someone hold poison seemed like exactly the wrong approach to station safety. Adriel took a large spoonful directly into his mouth while maintaining eye contact with both aliens. The defiant kind of eye contact that said he was absolutely aware this looked insane and planned to do it anyway. He chewed slowly, swallowed deliberately, and made a considering expression. "Could use more heat, honestly." Every alien within visual range made horrified noises in their respective languages. The translators struggled to find common equivalents for sounds that roughly meant, "Why is that creature still conscious? And someone stop this before we all witness death." Velvron Jax's hands shook slightly while pulling up the medical database, searching for human entries on capsaicin exposure. The results that appeared made the medical officer's secondary eyelids close in what might have been prayer or possibly just disbelief. Humans ranked capsaicin exposure under a category labeled pleasant flavor enhancement rather than anywhere near agonizing death or even mild discomfort. The database had to be wrong. Medical science didn't work this way. Biology had rules. Adriel took another bite and asked if anyone had seen his datapad because his meeting started soon. Velvron Jax insisted on emergency medical scanning despite Adriel's protest that his meeting started in 30 minutes and his supervisor got irritated about tardiness. The medical bay had transformed into something resembling a crisis command center, with multiple displays showing biological readouts that looked increasingly like someone was pranking the equipment. Full-body analysis confirmed capsaicin saturating Adriel's digestive system at concentrations used for planetary riot suppression, the kind of concentrations that military units deployed when they needed crowds to disperse immediately or suffer consequences, except those crowds dispersed because their biology understood danger, while Adriel just stood there looking annoyed about schedule disruptions. Brain scans revealed pain receptors firing in patterns consistent with significant distress. Adriel's neural activity absolutely registered the compounds as harmful. His nervous system was screaming. Every pain sensor in his digestive tract was sending urgent messages that something terrible was happening. Adriel's facial expression remained mildly irritated rather than agonized. Like someone stuck in a slightly boring meeting, not someone whose internal organs were experiencing chemical warfare. Explain survival mechanism. Velvron Jax's medical training covered hundreds of species across dozens of biological classifications, and none of this made sense. Pain detection systems confirm tissue damage occurring. Consciousness should not persist. I eat spicy food regularly. Adriel's shrug like this explained everything instead of nothing. You build up tolerance. Kinthrall sex, recovering nearby with 6 different injections counteracting the exposure from just walking past the commons, made a choking sound that the translator rendered as profane disbelief. The alien had required emergency intervention after breathing air that had contained capsaicin molecules. Adriel had put concentrated source material directly into his body and wanted to discuss meeting schedules. Voluntary repeated exposure to toxins. Silar again pulled up Adriel's dietary history, which the station tracked for supply allocation purposes. The records painted a picture of someone systematically poisoning himself 3 times daily. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, every single day. For recreational purposes, the file showed consumption patterns that read less like nutrition and more like a suicide attempt in slow motion. It's not poisoning if you enjoy it. Adriel checked his communication device for messages. Look, can we speed this up? I really do have obligations. Velvron Jax stared at the human, then at the medical readouts, then back at the human. Medical school had not prepared the officer for patients who acknowledged pain while simultaneously dismissing its importance. That violated fundamental assumptions about how survival instincts functioned. Your species deliberately cultivates resistance to compounds that serve no nutritional purpose. Silarigen scrolled through more dietary records, each entry more horrifying than the last. Makes food taste better. Adriel said this like it was obvious. Like choosing to damage yourself for flavor enhancement was completely rational behavior that needed no further explanation. The medbay doors opened and Bessie entered carrying a drink container, looking concerned. You missed our break. Brought your usual. Atmospheric sensors immediately detected new contamination sources emanating from Bessie's direction. The medical staff, already on edge from one inexplicable human, now faced 2 potential crisis patients. The drink container registered concentrations of caffeine that would induce cardiac arrest in most oxygen-breathing species. Velvron Jax's scanner started its warning sounds again, though with a slightly defeated tone, like the equipment was getting tired of being ignored. Bessie also brought snacks, small roasted seeds coated in salt quantities that would dehydrate a Velnari into dust within minutes. The sodium levels looked like someone had compressed an entire ocean into portable format. Thanks. Adriel accepted both items and consumed them while multiple medical professionals watched like they were witnessing fundamental physics break. He drank the consumed cardiac arrest catalyst. He ate the dehydration seeds. His vital signs remained stable. Does human biology include redundant organ systems we are unaware of? Velvron Jax asked desperately, searching for any explanation that fit within known medical science. Nope. Just one heart, standard kidneys, regular liver. Bessie checked her own communication device. Are we still doing lunch? The human section has fresh bread today. Donald's message appeared on Adriel's screen asking about lunch plans and whether Adriel was still coming because fresh bread didn't stay fresh forever and Gloria was already claiming the good loaves. VelvronJax realized this wasn't an isolated incident. This was standard human behavior. All of them did this. The entire species operated on biological principles that made medical intervention functionally impossible because the patients refused to acknowledge they needed intervention. Station records. Sylar again pulled up contamination alerts from the past. Lunar cycle. The list was extensive. Impressively extensive. The kind of extensive that suggested either equipment malfunction or something fundamentally wrong with reality. Humans had triggered contamination alerts 83 times. 83 separate incidents where atmospheric sensors, biological scanners, or chemical detectors had registered dangerous compounds and initiated safety protocols. Every single incident had resolved itself when humans cleared the area naturally, going about their normal routines, completely unaffected by substances that should have required medical response teams. Nobody had noticed the pattern because the humans kept clearing themselves. They would trigger the alerts, wander away to do whatever humans did, and the contamination would dissipate. The automated systems would reset. Life would continue. The station had been experiencing low-grade chemical crises on a regular basis, and everyone had just assumed the sensors needed recalibration. Do other species not do this? Adriel asked, finally picking up on the fact that the aliens seemed unusually distressed. Other species maintain biological systems that respond appropriately to harmful stimuli. VelvronJax's voice carried the exhaustion of someone whose entire education was being questioned. Pain exists as survival mechanism. Ignoring pain leads to death. Pain's not that bad, though, Bessie added helpfully, which did not help at all. You get used to it. The translator struggled with that sentence, eventually rendering it as something approximating deliberate dismissal of survival instincts, because no proper translation existed for the concept of casually ignoring your body's distress signals. Adriel finished the drink, pocketed the empty container, and looked at VelvronJax expectantly. So can I go? Meeting starts soon. The medical officer stared at the human for a long moment, then at all the equipment screaming warnings, then at Bessie who was eating more poisonous seeds while waiting. Yes, leave, please leave. VelvronJax made shooing motions. Do not return unless actively dying, and even then, confirm you are actually dying before coming here. Adriel and Bessie left discussing lunch plans and whether the fresh bread was the kind with seeds or the plain variety. Sylar again looked at Kinthril Sex, still recovering from second-hand capsaicin exposure. Humans are biologically independent from reality. Kinthril Sex's voice was weak but certain. This explains much about their history. Kinthril Sex demanded comprehensive briefing on human dietary tolerances before more incidents created station-wide panic. The research station's command had approved emergency session for human biology clarification after medical filed reports suggesting the species might be slowly killing themselves without realizing it. Gloria volunteered to explain, which should have been the first warning sign that this briefing would not provide comfort. She arrived with a portable display unit and the kind of confidence that suggested she thought this would be educational rather than traumatic. Human food isn't dangerous. Gloria started with this absolute lie. We just have different tolerance ranges. The presentation began innocently enough. Images of Earth vegetation, protein sources, preparation methods, standard nutritional overview that could apply to any species. Then Gloria reached the section on delicacies. Some fish contain neurotoxins if prepared incorrectly. The image showed something called fugu, which apparently humans ate despite it containing enough poison to kill 30 people if the chef made mistakes. It's considered expensive dining. Solaragen's translator made a sound like choking. Humans pay extra for potentially lethal meals. The danger is part of the appeal. Gloria said this like it made sense. Also, it tastes good. VelvronJax was taking notes with the frantic energy of someone documenting a disaster in progress. The medical officer had already updated human files 6 times today, and the briefing had barely started. Next slide showed fermented beverages. Liquids that produced alcohol as they decomposed. Humans deliberately consume decomposition byproducts for the specific purpose of impairing their neural function. Recreational intoxication. Gloria explained cheerfully. Very popular across most human cultures. Voluntary brain damage? Kinthralsex's scales had gone pale again. For entertainment? It wears off. Gloria moved to the next slide before anyone could process that information properly. Plants bred specifically for increased poison content. Generations of deliberate cultivation to make crops produce more capsaicin, more allyl isothiocyanate, more piperine. Humans had looked at plants that caused pain and decided they weren't painful enough, so they selectively bred more dangerous versions. Agricultural history as biological warfare against their own species. Sylar again stopped Gloria at slide showing something called Extreme Heat Challenge. The image depicted humans consuming substances that required liability waivers. Actual legal documentation acknowledging risk of injury or death, which humans signed voluntarily before eating. Why? Velvron-Jax's voice cracked slightly. What evolutionary purpose does this serve? Bragging rights mostly. Gloria shrugged. Also tastes good if you're into that. The medical officer calculated that human recreational eating contained more lethal compounds than the station's actual weapons armory. The security locker with restricted access and multiple authorization requirements had less dangerous contents than the human cafeteria section. That couldn't be right. Velvron-Jax checked the calculations again. Same result. Humans stored and consumed materials more hazardous than military-grade weapons, and they did this casually, daily, without considering it remotely unusual. This explains the caffeine incidents. Silaragen pulled up reports of humans remaining conscious and functional during hours when biological necessity should have forced sleep. Stimulant abuse? It's just staying awake. Melody had joined the briefing, looking confused about why everyone seemed upset. You don't have stimulants? Multiple species had stimulants, carefully regulated substances used during emergencies when personnel needed to override normal rest cycles temporarily. Medical supervision required, dosage limits enforced, usage logged and monitored. Humans just drank them. Casually. Multiple times daily. In concentrations that would require cardiac intervention for most species. The drink Bessie brought Adriel earlier. Velvron-Jax pulled up the scan results. Caffeine levels equivalent to military-grade alertness compounds. That's decaf, though. Melody said helpfully, which helped nobody. Regular has more. The translator rendered more with additional alarmed inflection that the original statement didn't contain, because the translation algorithms had learned to recognize when humans were about to say something horrifying. Decaf, the reduced version, the version humans chose when they wanted less stimulant, still contained enough caffeine to induce medical crisis in 4 different species currently on the station. What level exists in regular? Kinthralsex asked, with the tone of someone who didn't want the answer but needed it anyway. Melody pulled up specifications. The numbers appeared on the display. Every medical professional in the room made involuntary distressed sounds. That would cause immediate cardiac arrest in Quinthral species. Velvron-Jax's voice had gone flat. Within minutes of consumption. Possibly seconds. Huh. Melody looked at the specifications thoughtfully. Maybe that's why Javier gets jittery if he has too much. Jittery. Not deceased. Not requiring life-saving intervention. Jittery. Like the worst consequence of consuming lethal doses was mild hand tremors. Javier arrived late to the briefing carrying a drink container that the atmospheric sensors immediately flagged. He apologized for tardiness, explaining he'd needed to get his morning beverage first because attending meetings without caffeine seemed unproductive. The container's contents registered on Velvron-Jax's medical scanner, cardiac arrest catalyst. Concentrated enough that proximity to other species might cause contact intoxication. Is that regular or decaf? Sylar again asked with morbid curiosity. Regular. Javier took a sip. Decaf doesn't really work for me. The translator gave up on that sentence entirely, just displaying error symbols because no rational translation existed for someone claiming the lethal dose was insufficient for their needs. Then Javier mentioned the chocolate he brought for dessert. Gloria remembered suddenly. You wanted to try human sweets, right, Kinthralsex? The alien made a negative gesture that needed no translation. After the pepper incident, Kinthralsex had learned that human taste testing was inadvisable. Javier pulled out a small wrapped item anyway, breaking off a piece. It's dark chocolate. Supposed to be healthy. Velvron Jax scanned it automatically, professional habit overriding the growing sense of doom. Theobromine. Significant concentrations. Lethal to Kinthral species, Velnari, Kaesh, and Silarian variants. 4 different species represented in this room right now. 4 different biologies that would experience fatal reactions to what humans casually carried as snacks and described as healthy. Theobromine toxicity. The medical officer stated flatly. Fatal to multiple species present. You carry this freely. It's chocolate. Javier looked confused. Do you not have chocolate? We have toxins, yes. In medical storage, with restricted access. Silara Jen's voice carried the exhaustion of someone realizing the problem was much larger than initially assessed. Not in pockets as casual food items. That seems inconvenient. Javier ate the chocolate, maintaining eye contact, establishing dominance through deliberate toxin consumption. Gloria pulled up the final slide. Statistical overview of human dietary habits across their population. The numbers showed that these examples weren't outliers. This was normal, standard, expected behavior. Billions of humans consuming poison daily, voluntarily, recreationally, and considering it unremarkable. Request filed. Kinthral Sex announced, updating official records in real time. Human dietary choices should be respected without question, understanding, or attempted replication. Medical intervention only at explicit human request. Assume humans know whether they require assistance. The other aliens agreed immediately. Trying to save humans from themselves was clearly futile when the humans didn't acknowledge needing salvation. Javier finished his drink and asked if the briefing was done because he had actual work to complete. Gloria thanked everyone for coming and reminded them the human section was serving fresh bread at lunch if anyone wanted to try it. Nobody wanted to know what made the bread fresh, or whether fresh was another human term that secretly meant mildly lethal. The briefing ended with everyone slightly more traumatized and significantly less confident about their understanding of biology. Station Command reviewed the contamination incidents and mandated immediate medical evaluation for any human showing toxin exposure. The new protocol seemed reasonable until someone actually tried implementing it, which happened approximately 30 minutes after the directive went live. Automated systems detected Javier's morning drink, registering caffeine levels classified as stimulant overdose. The same Javier who'd just left the briefing explaining human biology. The same Javier whose beverage had already been scanned and discussed and determined to be horrifying but apparently normal. Medical teams rushed to his location in the engineering bay because protocols were protocols, and the alternative was ignoring potentially dying personnel. Velvron Jax led the response team with the enthusiasm of someone who already knew this would be pointless, but had to follow procedures anyway. Javier was already walking back from the beverage dispensary holding his drink, looking confused about why everyone was running and yelling. He'd gone to engineering, realized he needed more caffeine, walked to the nearest dispenser, and was returning to his workstation. Standard routine that apparently qualified as medical emergency. Javier. Cardiac stabilization required. Velvron Jax arrived with emergency medical equipment, slightly out of breath from sprinting. Stimulant overdose detected. I just got a refill? Javier held up his container like this explained everything. The dispenser was working again. The medical scanner confirmed lethal dose territory. Numbers that should correspond with someone experiencing heart failure, not someone standing upright having a conversation about beverage dispensers. Medical intervention necessary before cardiac arrest occurs. Velvron Jax prepared the stabilization equipment despite knowing this was futile. Protocols existed for reasons. Those reasons might not apply to humans, but the protocols still existed. I'm not having a cardiac arrest. Javier took another sip, maintaining eye contact. This is decaf. Several things happened simultaneously. Velvron Jax's secondary eyelids closed. Silarigen, monitoring from medical bay, made a sound the translator refused to process. Kinthral Sex, passing nearby, stopped walking and just stared. The decaf version. The reduced stimulant version. The version humans chose when limiting intake, still contained enough caffeine to put Silarigen into medical coma. Decaf contains sufficient caffeine for lethality across multiple species. Velvron Jax stated this as fact, which he was. You are consuming concentrated stimulant and claiming it is reduced dosage. Well, yeah, compared to regular. Javier seemed confused about why this was confusing. Regular would be like, triple this amount? The medical officer did some quick calculations about human caffeine tolerance, human baseline requirements, and human consumption patterns. The numbers suggested humans operated in perpetual state of stimulant overdose, which explained why they seemed alert during hours other species considered biologically impossible. Night shifts staffed entirely by humans made significantly more sense now. Not because humans were noble volunteers, but because their biochemistry ran on compounds that prevented sleep whether they wanted it or not. The station is implementing human-specific calibrations for contamination detection. Silaragan announced over communication channels, updating protocols in real time. Medical response no longer automatic for human-related alerts. Translation: the sensors would keep screaming, but everyone would ignore them, because responding to every human meal was unsustainable. Kinthril Sex established separate food storage zones with warning markers. Large, clear symbols indicating that contents were safe for human consumption, which meant potentially lethal for everyone else. The markers used the same hazard imagery as the reactor core section, because apparently that was appropriate. Velvron Jax updated medical protocols with extensive notes about human toxicology. The file now included phrases like consult human before intervention, pain tolerance exceeds rational parameters, and assume human assessment of own condition is more accurate than scanner results. That last one violated every principle of medical training, but practical experience suggested humans understood their own bizarre biology better than any amount of scientific analysis. Silarajan designed new station maps, color-coding areas by safety: green for generally safe, yellow for species-specific caution, red for human consumption zones. The red sections were marked with additional warning that contents might trigger atmospheric sensors despite being normal by human standards. The human cafeteria section got reclassified from dining facility to controlled chemical environment. Same space, same function, new designation that better reflected reality. This seems excessive, Bessie commented, reviewing the new safety maps during her break. Excessive? Gloria looked at the map, then at Bessie. Donald made popcorn last rotation, and we evacuated 3 decks. The popcorn wasn't that bad, Bessie said defensively. The atmospheric scrubbers ran for 6 hours, removing what the system classified as aerosolized irritants. Gloria pulled up the incident report. Donald used butter. Everyone uses butter on popcorn. Bessie maintained her position despite mounting evidence this was not universal behavior. Most species do not generate airborne compounds from heated dairy products, Kinthril Sex interjected, passing by with chemical analysis equipment. Butter production releases molecules that trigger biological defense responses. It's just butter, Bessie repeated, like saying it multiple times would make it less horrifying. Nobody argued further because arguing with humans about their food was pointless. They would continue consuming whatever they wanted regardless of whether it made sense. Better to just label everything clearly and let people make informed choices about exposure risk. Adriel returned to the commons to finish his chili, which had finally heated evenly. The food warmer was working properly again after maintenance fixed whatever had been causing temperature inconsistencies. He ate in the newly designated human consumption zone, surrounded by atmospheric scrubbers working overtime to process the capsaicin he was generating just by existing near his lunch. The scrapers hummed steadily, a constant background noise that had become normal operations. Across the station, Velvron Jax added a final footnote to the medical database. Human toxicology operates on principles fundamentally incompatible with rational biology. Do not attempt treatment based on logical assumptions. Consult human first, apologize later if consultation reveals your concern was unnecessary but appreciated anyway. Javier ordered his regular morning drink. Not decaf, regular. The version with triple caffeine. The contamination sensors detected it, logged it, and did absolutely nothing because the system had learned that humans existing near substances that should kill them was just normal operations. Life continued. slightly recalibrated for species that treated poison as seasoning and stimulant overdose as breakfast routine. 2 rotations later, maintenance discovered what humans stored in containers labeled leftovers, which triggered a whole new series of incidents requiring their own classification system. Velvron Jax updated the medical files again, added more warning labels, and considered whether transfer to a station without humans might benefit long-term mental health. The transfer request remained unfiled, though, because despite everything, humans were remarkably effective at their jobs when they weren't accidentally terrorizing everyone with lunch. Donald started making popcorn again the following week. The evacuation was smaller this time. Progress. This was just one story. Subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming next.